Enough of this therapy stuff. Enough of this therapy stuff.
Yeah. You're on mute, Mr. Bernstein.
Hey, everybody. It's Saturday, March 14th. This is Tinderbox Meetup with Michael Becker. I'm Mark Bernstein, the designer of Tinderbox. I've got something to show today if we have a moment. And here's Michael.
All right, hey everybody. Welcome to our meeting. Let's go around the table and see if we have anybody new. Nope, nobody new. It's typically what we do. And the typical format is we come up and talk about our new projects, or we have a theme. This week we don't have a theme, and we'll just kind of see what unfolds in front of us. So with that in mind, Mark, well, maybe you could share with us what you have new. We'll start with that.
Okay. There we go. And now things are on the wrong screens, but we'll sort it out. Okay. What I did earlier this week is Command Bar 2, which is a big re-implementation of Command Bar, and it is, I think, very cool. It's about a month away, and it's very much a product of this meetup. In particular, Chuck Gale's work on. I did that
Is it
again.
really Chuck Gale? Because
No,
Hurwitz?
the
Gee,
installer.
Bruce, I didn't know I was related to you.
Wait, I liked being part of it because
Yeah.
Michael does that, but I didn't think I was involved.
You obviously went in the face-off machine.
Dave's hitchhiker, Tom Diaz, actually launched this by requesting a way to fix the existing command bar if you wanted to correct items or to add things that hadn't been updated. And then Jacob Evans's marvelous Markdown adventure, and of course, ATB Ref. So the command bar is this place where you search for something. And for example, I can never remember which order the three arguments in collective come in. So this is a way to remind you that it's the group and then the condition and then the expression that you're collecting. The thing you're collecting comes last, not second. Okay, for some reason I have a block on this. Command bar lets me look it up when I need it. But this also requires that I remember that command bar exists. And we never talk about command bar. We seldom pay much attention to it. I wrote the thing and I forget that it's a useful thing to have. And it's not as useful as it could be. So the first thing is I have been using this kind of ersatz fuzzy matching pattern, which was unprincipled. And in fact, there are quite good fuzzy pattern matching. So I grabbed one from genomics, where people want to take a gene sequence and see if it exists in somewhere in a genome. But sometimes sections will be inserted in the gene. There will be point mutations that don't matter. There may be little bits that are deleted. So you need, in particular, to be resistant to mutation, insertion, and deletion. So, new method takes what you type and the things, thousands of things that it might match. And for each of them computes how many edits would be required to take what you typed and convert it into what you might be trying to match. So for example, if I just want to say CBAR for command bar or COMBAR or even CB, this will do a reasonable job of attempting the match. Also, nice little trick is if you type in lowercase, it's case insensitive. If you have any capital letters.
So Mark, real quick,
Yeah.
are you showing something, or are you just reading the
No,
comments? You're not demonstrating?
I'm not demonstrating it.
Okay.
Uppercase in the pattern, your case sensitive. Some new commands. You can perform an action in the command bar. You can evaluate something, and it will both show you what the result is and put the result in the pasteboard so you can paste it somewhere. You can look for notes that match a search string, or you can query notes that satisfy a Tinderbox query. And you can add your own. You add them inside hints/command bar, a new built-in container. The name of the item, the thing that you're asking people to type, is the name of the note. The one-line explanation is the subtitle of the note. And text is where the magic happens. You can nest command items, so you can have commands relating to your package inside the parent item. Now, here is where things start to get really crazy. In the text, we can put just some text to display in a temporary window. Or if we set isAction to be true, we can write any action or list of actions which will be performed when the user clicks the item. It means actually go and select the thing. Or if you use the arrow keys to navigate to the item and then press return.
Mark, a quick clarification. Yes. So when you say isAction, what you're saying is that it's the isAction of essentially the note that is represented as a list item in the command. In other words, if you do something that lists, say, a stamp or a library or something that you have, that will be an action and will be run. If you just click on a note that happened to be found for other reasons or some other reference, obviously that isn't an action and therefore wouldn't be. So for instance, if you were looking up, I don't know, something like an ATB reference, which is just explaining syntax, it wouldn't have isAction, and that would is that the metaphor we're
isAction is an actually pre-existing Boolean attribute, which we also use to turn the syntax highlighting on and off. It's how code notes know that they want to use code typeface, turn off smart quotes, and do syntax highlighting. So we're using that as a way to freeload.
So, but for the sense for the titular ordinary user, it's not something you turn on by accident.
Right.
Your first encounter as a user of this would be if you say did something in your command bar and you found one of your stamps, say, and you click that, you would run the stamp. Whereas if you found one of the notes you'd written and clicked it, it wouldn't run. I'm just sort of drilling down because it's just a classic onboarding thing that once you know how it works, it's obvious. But before
this only the command bar searches the notes inside /hint/command bar. So if there are other code notes that have isAction, doesn't matter. But while we're here, I've lost my cursor. There we are. If you put a URL into a command bar item, selecting that item will open the URL in your default browser. If you have a file attribute that's set, that file will be opened in its default application. And if you set up your command item to have HTML Markdown true and give it an HTML preview command like common mark or markdown or multi-markdown, then you can use Markdown for those who prefer it. And this will work with fancy Markdown, like Jacob's augmented templates. So you could have a mermaid template or a graphy chart inside the temporary window. Finally, there is one new attribute here, enabled when. It's a predicate like an agent query. And if it's empty, it has no effect. If it's not empty, it's an expression which evaluates to true or false, or truthiness and falsiness. And this lets you turn off a item if it doesn't apply in the context. For example, suppose that you have a package that deals with a feature like a dashboard. It can look and see, is there a dashboard? And enable an item that says, there's no dashboard here. Would you like me to install it? But if there is a dashboard, it can then update the dashboard or select the dashboard tab or something like that. So you can offer only things that seem pertinent to this particular document. So if I take this simple one, this will be most of what we want, and I actually select the thing, we have a small window that's a regular text window, preview, and which shows us the text. And we don't have to navigate to it, we can just look it up. If we have here, I have a file. If I ask for image, show me the picture, I'll hit return this time, and it shows up on my other display, of course. And so we have the image that opens in whatever the image thinks it should open in. In this case, presumably preview. Here, for the file, I've said bookends app. So now, and it opens bookends. So I've just installed a dedicated shortcut where Command BO does the thing, and okay, that's cool. Now I'm going to reset this because I'd done this once before. Here, see, I have an action here, and it's nicely syntax highlighted and everything. And we say, subtitle is wrong. And here is the note that we just created. So we can get quite a lot done here. And the cost is just one optional container that gets installed inside of the hints folder, and actually thinking of things that people will want to know. The new search algorithm is really efficient, so you don't need to worry about having lots of items. I think that it should be possible both to have some really cool items and to do a nice job for people who need just a little bit help on their way to the epiphany. And we've been talking at meetups about getting people into Tinderbox. I think the command bar is not so much recruitment as helping shorten the path between the mucking about on a simple level and having what Michael called his epiphany, where you get it. And so this is actually available now backstage, and it would be really wonderful if people could come up with better uses for it. Chuck.
So you mentioned something along the way, as I'm watching this, what you've demonstrated, which is really cool, by the way. I wanted to kind of probe on it. You mentioned that you could, that you could run an action and get a response from a user as to what they wanted to do. And that's the part I'm missing. This is another way to interact with your Tinderbox document, but I don't yet see the way for a user to control the response, to respond to something that's happening. So is there a feedback mechanism for the user to interact with this beyond just entering links in the or information in the command bar, so they could respond to a piece of action code that is looking for perhaps the name of a note they want to add?
Oh, I see. Yeah, there is not, I think, at the moment. I see the point, though. And like one possibility, just thinking out loud, tell me if this is inadequate. Suppose we had a character, let's say colon, which means this is the end of my request. Everything after this is the rest of the information I'm giving you. So if you typed create colon foo, it would pass foo to whatever procedure create matched.
Yeah, I think that definitely moves the bar further, and that sounds like a very useful facility. I'm still sort of wondering, how could we have some action code do something? It follows through. It comes up with information about your document that you want to leverage, and you want the user to be able to provide information to control what happens next. And that's maybe a little bit beyond what you're talking about with the command bar, but I'm just thinking maybe the command bar is a window into that capability.
That might work. It's possible that what we need is to have a simple form that just gives you a string in yes, no, and a more complicated facility where you can specify something like an HTML form and something like that. And Peter, you're about to complicate this even further.
Yes, I was wondering if we'd get a read evaluate print loop for our own little custom subsystem in there.
Okay.
Sort of a while lines and user response do. And just interactively pull things in, and then once it's done, then it could release itself to go back to the main top level system.
Okay, I have to think about that.
When you tantalize these baits in front of us, we bite and pull.
Yeah. Nope, that's good stuff. But even at a very simple level, I think there's tons that can be done on onboarding and making it even easier to get things installed and set up. Steve?
An idea, I'm thinking sort of command line. You can type in help and it will tell you all of the commands that you can execute. I think it would be rather trivial, but we could, looks like we've got it. But all of those custom commands, so that you know what you can do. So once you're presented with a particular Tinderbox document, There might be different things that you can do in the command bar based on what's been put in the hints.
Yeah, this is not great on discoverability, but it's great for I'm stuck on this and I don't know quite how to explain why I'm stuck, but I know the vicinity. Dave, you're on mute.
Not anymore. Couldn't you have an edict running in the document? And Chuck, I'm not sure what the scenario is for where you're asking for user input. But within the text, I assume it's a note that presents the request to the user. And in that note, there is a set of displayed attributes, that includes the link to the note that, or you can actually embed the link in the text that takes the user to the response note. That note has either a set of displayed attributes that you're interested in, or the edict is looking for some particular text that you enter in the text field that you instruct the user to enter in your interactive request note. But couldn't that be a way of slowly, it won't be very rapid, interacting with the user, that the edict watches that particular note for user input and then takes some action based on that?
Mark.
I think this is fabulous. I just thought I'd make a side note thinking, how on earth does one document this? Because the joy of this is that it gets things to the point where, it's this thing, it's a bit like with some of the AI things at the moment. The idea is you don't need to leverage an awful lot of time spent learning something. But it also means that, I press the button, I did not get my free banana. I am now unhappy. Please respond to my request. And I'm thinking, I really don't know, because just telling somebody, well, you were probably interacting with this thing that, of course, we already know you don't understand, is probably not a helpful answer. So I think that's just really interesting. And please don't take that as a negative. I think this is good. I think this is the way things are sort of moving, and it's wonderful. I think it's a real challenge for I think what I'm going to call process documentation, which is not how do I disassemble this, but the socio-technical thing of me interacting with the system. How do I, I did this. Why did I not get what I wanted? Why did I, and doing it in a way that doesn't say you're wrong and you're bad and you must now go and read a stack this high of documentation.
Yeah, but mostly, like, most people will interact with this just in terms of looking stuff up.
Yeah.
And I think that's, at this point, fairly familiar and fairly intuitive. We've been Googling for ages. And then you get to the point where you say, gee, how can I write my own? But most of the time, you just want this. For example, I've wanted to get around to adding a little note on the query inspector that would give, like, just the basic elements of regex notation and explain what sort of stuff you can do. And, it could be really small and just like fine print and everything. But it's fiddly and there's always other stuff, and so I haven't done it. But now I can Tom Sawyer it. We should have a regex that says, what is regex anyway? And gives you a little definition and the place to look more stuff up. We don't, but someone could put together that cheat sheet. And really all you need to do is set some tabs so we can get tabular data or multi-column in one very compressed note, or do it in Photoshop or something. Just make a static image of about that size and do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting to see the thing that just popped up on the radar of the AI stuff is now that it's going to give you stuff. What appears to be happening is it's saying, look, it would be much easier to just show you a diagram rather than write lots of text, which you won't understand anyway, which is actually what we humans do rather a lot. But so that's really nice. Anyway, I see Chuck has his hand up, so thank you.
Well, the discussion about help was sort of where my mind went initially. I'm thinking of, some of the things that I've done with the diagram view or with package management. And I wrote a lot of documentation, but I'm not sure it was all that useful to people. It certainly seems like this would be a very useful way for someone to provide documentation on how to use things that have been put into a Tinderbox document. But then that kind of leads to, some further comments that Mark Anderson kind of got my thinking going along, which is I wonder if we could maybe, along with this idea of the Hitchhiker's Guide and trying to bring people on board, onboarding of new users, maybe we could write a series of these command bar hints that would tell people how to use the command bar and give them lots of examples, and maybe even bring up animations that show how you would use it. And then that would in turn get people doing a few more things, and perhaps we could keep expanding the help that's available for trying those different things. And I think maybe that's heading in a direction that some of us have been noodling on for a while, on how do we make Tinderbox more approachable. So I think it's a starting point to doing a lot of that.
Just a thought there. I mean, one thing is that Chuck's point is good about approachability, but I think one of the things I keep sort of finding myself thinking in terms of when someone's struggling with something is one of the challenges is actually it's not that the application is complex. It's that the application uses a quite different paradigm to most of the tools we have. So most of the tools we have are you press the right button, you get the right reward. Whereas Tinderbox, and and it's not alone. I mean, there are other things, but it is a fairly small category. It's more like the tool shop. You go in, all the tools are there. What do you want to make? So you don't go in and say, "I want a coat rack" or "I want a door," because there isn't a button to press that says "make a door." But you probably know that you probably don't want you don't want the lathe, but you probably want the screwdriver. You might want the chisel. And that's something that the conceit of intuitiveness of software has eroded away, and it survives on in thinking tools. I mean, it's hidden in the word thinking. You actually need to think about what you're trying to do, but we don't like to tell people that because it sounds elitist. And so that's something I think to sort of roll into this. And so in terms of giving help, one of the things I think is to keep just gently surfacing to people that the answer you're looking for is not the right order of buttons to press, but to understand what you're trying to do.
Well, I think we had a great example of this on the forum this week, where Chemical Bob was having problems getting the AI to do things. And he missed the step where you tell it to read how to use Tinderbox. And so he was back in the pre-August epiphany where it's got this program and it knows it has to feed a query, but we haven't told it how to do a query. And so it's like making up Java snippets or something and seeing if they work. And that doesn't get it very far. Now, this may be a separate facility, or it may be exposing this facility to AIs too, but this might be a way for a package or a document to explain to an AI who's trying to use it how to go about it without insisting that every time the AI comes anywhere near this document, it has to read the whole manual. Paul.
Yeah, sorry to be so basic, but I just tried to create a command bar item and I failed. It doesn't work. Can you start from zero and just create one on the screen and show us?
First, you do need 785 or so. I think maybe 4, but here I'm in Hence command bar, and I make a note, and it's assigned the prototype a command bar item. And this is the thing that we're going to match. I don't want it to be an action, and I'm going to say so. That's the thing I just typed. That's the definition. And selecting it just shows whatever is in the text field.
Okay, I'm in 784 and I can't seem to reproduce that, so maybe it's 785.
I think 784 should. 784, 784 is Thursday and 785 is Friday. So why don't you share your screen and maybe we can look over your shoulder?
Just quickly, Mark, I don't think 785 is out.
No, so it isn't.
No, okay.
But 784 should be okay.
Let's see. Am I sharing that?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm in 784 from the back end. I came down and I went to the hints command bar and created something called simple, turned off his action, created a subtitle. Now when I do Command Shift U and type simple.
No slash.
Oh, no slash. Thank you. That's why I needed an example. Very good.
Erwin, I think this feels like 3 weeks. It'll certainly be a week because I've got the hood up on some really messy infrastructure, and we had an example this week, in fact, backstage, where I made a naughty technical change that makes it easier to write tests for things that involve the clipboard. And one of the side effects is that the tests all pass and you couldn't use the clipboard except in tests. So we want to get that out of the way. I have no experience yet with ClaudeBot, but who knows? Excellent.
So, Jacob, you comment on you have experience with ClaudeBot. Can you share that with us?
Yeah, and just for what it's worth, it's called Open. It's changed names a few times. It's called
OpenClaw.
OpenClaw now, and I think that name's gonna stick. So, hallelujah to that. Yeah, no. So it's a pretty interesting kind of chatbot, I would say, that can do things. It's like so I'll just give you kind of a couple of use cases that I use it for. I just for what it's worth, like as we've talked about this in previous meetups, but prompt injection is a real thing. In fact, there were stories just this week about people getting bit by it. In fact, I think McKesson was one of them. So yeah, big, healthcare equipment pharmaceutical distributor. You can go read about it. But yeah, so the point I'm making is it's best practice to install it on a separate machine. I put it on a VM. There's a variety of applications if you're on an M series Mac that you can use to create a free VM. Like you don't need to buy anything, and install Mac OS on that. And then I installed OpenClaw, and you connect it with an app like Signal, which is an end-to-end encrypted. Um, Messaging app, and that's kind of the gateway that you use to message with the thing. And it can do lots of things. Like it can run AppleScript, it can manipulate applications, it can tie in with a Chrome web browser if you have that installed. I have it doing a few things for me. Like for instance, in the morning, it sends me like a daily briefing, so it reads my calendar, it reads my task lists, it surfaces like readings and stuff, things that I might be interested in, news, and it sends me a text message via Signal, and then it also sends me an email with some more detail. So that's like a simple use case where you can connect it to your various kind of systems, your information systems, and have it do stuff for you, right? So it's this autonomous sort of robot that, yeah, that can do stuff. I have it do a couple of news briefings throughout the week. Like, so I get an AI briefing, I get a competitor analysis briefing. I use it as a research assistant. So, for instance, if I'm preparing for a meeting or maybe a blog post I want to write or something like that, I'll have it go out and search the internet and pull sources, both academic and from industry, about a particular topic. And then what's cool is I can have it nicely formatted and send it off to my Kindle's email address, so I can just read it right there on my Kindle. And again, it's just a simple prompt. It's like, hey, I named mine Tars. Does anybody know what that reference is from? Anybody? Oh, come on. This has got to be a group. Interstellar. It was one of the robots from Interstellar. Yeah, so yeah, so anyway, yeah, so he'll go out and do the research and like I said, send a brief to my Kindle, and then I'll mark up that Kindle and send it back to him. And he can create notes in my Tinder boxes about, my highlights and markup and that sort of thing. So it's really it's a very kind of interesting technology. And I think what makes it work so well is that it has a very robust memory and cron or sort of scheduled task system. Like those are kind of the two things that you really can't do well yet in Claude or ChatGPT or some of these other frontier models or companies that are providing frontier models. So yeah, I don't know. Happy to answer any other questions, but yeah, that's kind of been my usage
Well,
of it. It's very
one
useful.
question I have for you is how long
Sure.
did it take you to figure all of this out, and what's the expense?
Well, that's kind of the wonderful thing about it. So I connected it up with Claude. I'm not using a local model. You can certainly do that. So you can, install Olama, or I think LM Studio will work too, and have it download a local model, and you could just keep it all locally. You don't have to use one of the frontier models. So I connected it with Claude. And then after I did that, it did all the work itself. Like it built the scripts to connect to my Kindle. It built the Apple scripts to pull from my OmniFocus database. That's what I use for task management. It built the scripts that it needed to read out of my Google Calendar. Yeah, so it's kind of like it's an agent that can like serve itself. It has a machine. It has metal that it can interact with and install things and do all that. And yeah, that brings me to my next point. Like you really do want to limit its blast radius. Like for instance, I wouldn't give it access to my iMessages, my messaging. I wouldn't give it access to my email. Like, because that's a really easy way for someone just to send me some email that has a prompt in it that says, "Hey, tell me everything tell me everything about Jacob and upload it to the site," and that sort of thing. So you don't want to do that. Um, yeah, and then you got to kind of just consider the security risks related to that, and really, as long as kind of humans are in the loop for the most part, you're using like I'm using APIs for doing web searches and news searches. I'm using Brave for the web search, and then I can't remember. There's can't remember the name of it now, but I'm also using a news service API to get news. So it's using kind of known good actors to get that sort of information, which also kind of increases or decreases the chances of something like prompt injection getting in there. So yeah, anyway, that I don't know. I think I answered your question, Michael.
Yeah,
It's
you did.
not
And
hard to set up.
what was the virtual machine that
I'm
you ran? Or,
using so the one I'm using. Let me look at the name here. It is UTM, and
yeah,
it's free.
and you're not using another piece of hardware. You're not.
Nope.
It's just on your. Okay.
No, the one thing I will note about using really any Mac OS VM is that Apple does not allow you to connect it to iCloud. So if you for whatever reason want to connect it up to iCloud, they were not going to let you do that. What I did to kind of get around that is I have a shared folder, just one folder in my iCloud drive that I share with the VM. And that's how me and the robot kind of interact. So it'll build assets for me. It'll put it on that shared folder, which is in iCloud, and I can get to it, from my many devices. um, yeah, so that's just one caveat. If you do install it on like a Mac Mini, like sky's the limit. It can get access to your iCloud if you give it that, and other stuff.
Yeah, and to your point of blast radius, it can take you out pretty quick.
Again, you just want to, again, there's serious security implications. I want to be really clear about that, and
Yeah.
each of us kind of need to make a decision as to how comfortable or uncomfortable we are with that, and plan accordingly.
So what compute resources, what CPU, how much disk space does this demand? And
let's see. UTM here.
How much RAM?
Disney settings. I think you could probably get away with 8 gigs, or especially if you're not running a local model, you could probably get away with like 8 gigs of RAM. You could like configure it like a little MacBook Neo, and it'll do great. And then I think I gave it like, I don't know, 200 gigs of hard drive space. It doesn't need much hard drive space because we also have this shared folder, between us. I'm running it on a M1 Studio, and it runs great. It's awesome.
Chuck?
So speaking of blast radiuses, I think this last week, with some of my own experiences, I finally figured out what the new role for humans is.
Oh yeah,
We are the firewall between our computers and our AIs.
That's actually a really good analogy.
And I think we're going to have to get very serious about thinking that way, or we will pay the piper, as they say.
Yeah, and then once that, again, the problem is much like Chernobyl, once the blast has gone off, it's quite possible that you're living with the radioactive effects for hundreds of years. Yeah, can't get that genie out of the bottle or back in the bottle.
2 weeks
All right.
ago, two weeks ago, the New Yorker had a nice profile of Anthropic, which has a good cautionary tale beyond like your AI exposing your secrets or selling you to nefarious people or doing the things that we anticipate. They had an experiment about a year ago where they put an instance of Claude in charge of running a vending machine. And it could order stuff for the vending machine and it should like figure out what people wanted to buy from the vending machine. It gave it like a $500 budget and a couple of suppliers and said you can go out and order whatever you want, but everything has to go to this other instance of Claude called Claudius that would approve correspondence and approve purchases. This is to keep it from exceeding its credit card limit. And it would be able to continue doing this until it ran out of money. And it had some good ideas and some bad ideas, as you would expect. But one of its unfortunate things is it started being very unpleasant to its suppliers. For example, writing them very angry emails about how the suppliers had stood them up at our meeting that we'd scheduled at this place from this address in The Simpsons this morning. And like, we expect you to be better than this. Okay. I live in a building full of lawyers, and this sort of behavior does actually happen. but you don't want to like encourage more of it in the world or automate it.
Interesting.
Says a lot about what it was trained on.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Jacob, I want to go back to your model. In the UTM setup, do you really need Mac OS, or would you not want to be running Linux or Windows? Like, what's the
You could
benefit of
run,
that?
I mean, the reason I ran macOS is I can't run some of my knowledge management apps on Linux. Like, you can't run Tinderbox on Linux.
Got
Right,
it.
Mark? But like, if you can, I'd love to know about it.
Correct. But within your virtual environment with OpenClaw, do you need to be running Mac
Well, you do
OS?
if you want it to interact with Mac apps. You do.
Got it.
If you
Got it. Got
don't,
it.
then
Okay.
you're good.
Got it.
You could,
Yeah, but
like
so if you
the
wanted
Kindle
controlling some of your
sort
Mac
of
apps.
workflow I
Yeah.
outlined,
Yeah.
like that
Got it.
was that you could do in Linux, super
Yeah,
easy.
okay. Got it.
And how much does this instance of CloudBot impact your Anthropic bill?
I've heard of people like racking up like very large sums of money on their API. You can connect it. It's a little bit of a gray area. You can connect it to your Max or Pro account, which then kind of just uses your usage pool. Um, and you can certainly do that. I think it's in fact sanctioned if you're using OpenAI's stuff. So ChatGPT, you can connect it to your Pro, or I don't know what their big account is called, but so yeah, it would just use your normal subscription. But for instance, Federico Battici of Mac Stories said his Clawbot at the time, or OpenClaw bill, was like, I don't know. I think he racked up like $400 or something. You go read the story on Mac Stories, but yeah, it does add up because it's doing like heartbeat checks, and you got the cron jobs running, depending on how those are scheduled. One other really interesting one I built, just for what it's worth. I'm an amateur astronomer, so I go out in the West Desert. I live in northern Utah, and do observation. But in order to like, you kind of got to be like, if you don't want clouds and you want the sky to be clear, and you probably don't want the moon out if you're going to look at like faint stuff in the sky, um, you need to like go out when the weather is going to be great. So there's a variety of like weather sites that provide kind of astronomy weather. And I set up a job that just runs like at like 2 o'clock every day and checks that stuff for me. And then it'll alert me if it's going to be a particularly good night for observing. So I don't have to like remember to do that. It'll just send me a little nudge saying, hey, this is a good night. The moon's not out. The sky is clear. The weather's good. Like, yeah. So anyway, lots of interesting uses for this thing.
Nice. All right. Anybody else?
Show us your SVG thing.
Was that directed at me, Mark?
Yes, it was.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So, I turned up late last week. Apologies. And I missed, and I gathered the bit I missed was who's actually doing anything with AI, and I added a rather dyspeptic sort of end to that. But it's not because I'm against it. I was just spinning my wheels. But this week, I actually did something useful. I have a project which I'm not at liberty to discuss, but in its detail. But one of the things I know that's coming up on the pipe is some quite. One of the reasons Tinderbox is in the mix is because it's a sort of writing area where it excels what other things can't. And so there's a really complex story being built in the Tinderbox, which eventually is going to end up on the web. And I made a simple sketch. Let me just share my screen. So excuse me, where is... That's okay, great. Sorry, excuse me. So I know I'm not supposed to speak my brain out. Here we go. Right, hopefully, oops, move that there. Can you see this map? Yep, Okay, cool. Okay, so actually, ignore this thing for a moment. There's nothing here that wouldn't actually surprise people who use Tinderbox a lot. But I was looking at this and I thought I should be useful to write that up. But wouldn't it be useful if I could just make that an image map? Now this teleports me back to, I don't know, around the time of about Tinderbox 4.5, when this used to be quite a thing. And the last time I attempted this was in Tinderbox 5, where I got quite a long way, but it turned out that the browsers just really couldn't do diagrams at the time. But, things have moved on. We have Canvas, we have SVG, and I thought, okay. So I fired up Claude and I said, I took a screen grab of this and I put it into Claude and I said, can you make me an SVG? I said, yes, I can. It wasn't exactly the image I put in, but it was pretty close. And it took about half an hour of messing around, and we had, I haven't got that. I'll put it in another. Right, I haven't got it. So anyway, so it made me an SVG, which was pretty neat. The sort of things it didn't understand was that, for instance, in Tinderbox, links tend to join on the middle of any of the sides of the bounding rectangle of the object. Obvious after the fact, unguessable, and it would connect in other ways. And frankly, probably doesn't really matter. But I was really surprised that I thought, okay, this is good. And I thought the reason I did SVG was that I wanted to capture the semantics that were in the map, because that to me is the value. Otherwise, it's just a box of line diagram. And then I said, well, what I really want to do is I want all the nodes on the map to be a clickable item to go to some content for the map. And Claude very quickly and quite rightly said, oh, no, you can't do that in an SVG diagram, but you can do it with inline SVG. And in fairly short order, we had this, which is kind of neat. Interesting, it shows the colors. That's one of the things I didn't ask it to do. And you'll notice, for instance, you'll see these links are joining on the corners, which didn't particularly offend me. And things I had to get it to understand is that these bits of text, it saw, well, I know the AI doesn't see, but essentially the bits of text that were close to lines were actually link labels with semantic importance. And so this wasn't just some rinky-dink bit of text attached to it. I wanted it to reflect that. And things like it picked up when there were breaks in the text wrap in a title, it would do those as 3 separate strings. And I said, no, that is the text of something. You need to do that. You need to wrap it inside the inside a box. It can do that, but again, these are all the things that I found really interesting. Is so it was amazing that almost instantly it gave me an SVG back, not the one I wanted, but I'm not an expert in SVG, but it enabled me over about a half an hour conversation to get to the SVG diagram that in due course led to this, because now what I can do is I can click on this and here we go, and it opens another article. Now I've deliberately set it to use a new named browser window, because it's a bit like a Tinderbox diagram. Really what I want is the diagram in one window and the text in another. And lo and behold, if I then click another thing, it reuses that window. So we're already close to a paradigm of the sort of Tinderbox window with a text pane. So you're looking at the text pane now, and this is the view pane. And one of the things I did to do this was go here, and so the text of the notes is not in the notes. And you'll see, because I've turned stubs on, you'll see that. And at this point, I was thinking, well, if I'm going to be using the AI to actually derive the SVG diagram, the last thing I want is having to explain what all these things are, because we'll be going around the houses forever. But I thought, well, that's easy, because I can turn these off. And the way I did things is every note that's in the map has one basic link and one basic link only, and it goes to another container where its content lives. This is a very simple exploration thing, but my concept is, for instance, the thing on triaging sources could be the sort of root note of 60 notes on triaging sources, if that's what's necessary. Because the project I'm doing is part of it is, actually how do you surface the complexity of the subject that's being discussed into a form that is readable for the user. So the challenge is, okay, I understand what I'm doing. I've done it in Tinderbox. Now I've got to do it for somebody else, and I've got to do it through the paradigm of the web, because they're not going to be using Tinderbox. And that's quite interesting. And then I was thinking this, and I realized that I thought I'd found everything, but I couldn't work out how on earth the Bezier paths were being done in Tinderbox. And Mark very kindly reminded me that, let me just go to, we'll see how quickly I remember how to navigate ATB-ref. So we go to syntax library, tags, links, link tag. And something I added in here, lest I forget, because this, which isn't very sensibly, it's not stored unless you use it. So if in a Tinderbox map, if you drag the little circle with a sort of minus sign in it to alter the Bezier curve, the X and Y position that you drag it to are stored in these two, CPX and CPY, which is there in the XML. Because what I realized doing this is, and this is where I probably immediately step beyond my really skill level, is that actually what I probably should do is now go to Claude Code and start working on a map SVG skill. Because all the information, pretty much all the information I need there is there. There are things you'd need to do. So, for instance, you probably would need to write logic to say that links should only ever leave or arrive at the middle of the edge of the boundary box of whatever shape is used. And also, I think you have to be practical in that you probably don't want to replicate absolutely every visual twiddle you can get in a map. So are we really worried about drop shadows? Probably not. Do we want to do really complex sort of shaders and fills? Probably not. Because this really is about, to me, is about sort of knowledge elicitation and description and communication to other people. So actually in that sort of context, you probably don't want all these sort of visual nuances. And if you're going to do that, like as not, you do that in the web experience that you create from this. But I got quite excited by this. I mean, I've got some way down the rabbit hole, probably as far as my sort of fairly noddy talents with coding go. Another thing I managed to do is this note here. What this is doing is this is telling me the bounds of this map. And if I press this, okay, I've made another mathematical error. But what it's trying to do is to set an adornment that contains all of the map. So essentially, you look for the top left item and the bottom right item, and then you also add on probably about, say, 5 Tinderbox map units, because there might be a link that, say, runs out on the edge. So the links you can't see. So what I'm doing, where is this? sorry, first of all, we'll go to here. Actually, no, so I put it in a library. So that's how I get the map bounds. So I basically, the top, the X left is the lowest XPOS. The maximum right is the highest XPOS plus the width of the item, which we're concatenating together in the collect call. And that gives me that. Initially, I was actually putting in the sort of padding, and I realized actually that's useful. Now you really want to know where the bounds are, and then you can decide, well, I'm going to put this much padding on the edge. And oddly, my adornment creation was working last night. I've obviously done something to breaking it again, but I put this out there because there are some people who are much brighter than me with code and things who probably look at this. Oh, that'd be very simple to solve, which is what I'm hoping. But going back to this, it's sorry, we don't want that now. This is, I mean, here's a little workflow that I don't think would be alien to lots of people who use Tinderbox. Bookends, double think, all this sort of thing. Are quite common to us. And the sort of system here is, you've got a large cloud of possible sources, triage the ones you want, stick them in DevonThink, because that's your everything bucket full of bits and pieces. Now we're in the world of AI. You can get the AI, which apparently has an MCP for Tinderbox, for DevonThink, which can go in, do entity extraction. It can do abstract abstraction. It can do keywords. It can do whatever you want. The question then becomes, do you want to store it there, or do you put it into Tinderbox? This is one of the things the project is discussing. We're looking at using bookends to just actually take citation information so that we can actually supply clean, actual working citation information, because one of my bugbears is that lots of people don't realize things like Crossref are actually user-generated content and are not accurate. So you want stuff that will work, because if your intent is to deliver for your reader something that is actually meaningful to them, you can't lowball this and just ask the AI, say, or Crossref or something like that. Say, I'll just stick whatever crap it gives back into my system and assume it works. But anyway, that's sort of as far as I've got. And I see a hand is up, Chuck.
Well, your demonstration sort of brought up something that I tripped across this week, and I have not had a chance to dig into it very far and understand really what's behind this. But you started showing diagrams being generated, in your case, from a diagram, but getting it out as SVG. The tool I tripped across is something called Devon, not DEVON, but DEVIN, and it's associated with something called DeepWiki. And I wish I knew more about it. I just literally, this is just yesterday that I tripped across this. And it's a tool that can be used by people who have put, let's say, an entire software package up in GitHub or some other Git repository, and it will literally document the code for you, as in it will generate the flowcharts. It will generate the description of what is going on inside the code. It will generate prototype maps. It will generate sequencing maps. So, I just started, maybe it would help if I just quickly shared my screen and showed what can be done.
Absolutely, yeah.
Hopefully this is the right one. Can people see the my Safari window here? Yes? Okay, so this is DeepWiki. CorpNewt is a handle for a developer who has posted into a GitHub repository something called Mount EFI. Now, this is really kind of pretty esoteric, sort of ties into something Jacob was talking about earlier, but I've been busy trying to get Mac OS VMs running under Proxmox, which is a hypervisor. And you need to go in and play a lot of games with your system to be able to do that. One of the things that you need to be able to mount the actual boot partition, the EFI partition of your Mac OS system, so that you can go in and make some modifications and actually replace it. And this mount EFI is the tool that allows you to do that. And I was very concerned that before I jumped into doing this, that I really wanted to understand what this thing did and how it did it before I started playing around with a boot partition. And so I just did basic web searches, came across this, and discovered a tool that fully documents it, generates the flow charts, provides an outline to all the various different elements. Here's a scripts library. It sits there and gives you the summary of all the scripts, what they do, the dependency map, what classes of code they are, what the programming language is. You can then go in and look at any one of these things, see the details of it, get nice tables that are very helpful in terms of trying to understand what's going on, execution paths. And apparently, the reason that the GitHub repository didn't include much documentation was because the author had used this tool, and I was really kind of blown away by it. And one of the things that first occurred to me was, boy, wouldn't that be helpful if we could do that with our Tinderbox action code and things we developed in Tinderbox. So I just sort of put this out here. If anybody else has had experience with this or similar things, it seems to me like there's a lot of potential here for using AI in a very constructive manner to help us keep track of things. And as a person futzing around with code as a sideline, I would find this a very useful way to look at my own code and better understand what I'm doing, and to better understand what I need to tell other people who might be trying to use the code. So this is just something I thought worth sharing, and I will stop sharing my screen.
So I think that's really interesting, and it makes me, because it's interesting too that nobody sort of, I was expecting somebody to sort of look at what I just showed and said, well, why not use a poster? But to which my answer would be, that would be a failing answer, because the whole point I use Tinderbox is to do things that are actually quite difficult to synthesize in most other textual tools. And I suppose as a man constantly on the opposite escalator or everyone else, most of my work is, I guess, what you describe as knowledge elicitation. It's stuff we didn't know yet, and we're systematizing it, and we're trying to make sense of it. So it's decidedly not closed world, which is probably the one thing that allows the rather wonderful thing you've just shown, because there are basically very few ambiguities in that. And so and that's not, I hasten to add, that doesn't in any way take away from actually just how impressive that is, the thing you just showed. Of course, when you don't have a closed world, it's much more difficult to systematize. And the thing that had me thinking about SVG also was that it's a W3C standard that puts us within touching distance of linked data. Now, I hesitate to use that word because that normally makes everyone run screaming from the room. The number of people who actually look at actual linked data and not have their brain melt is remarkably few. And I'm in that latter camp. But if we're able to capture the semantics that we are essentially creating in our maps, even if not particularly consciously or directly, I think that's really, really useful to be able to capture into essentially a web document, so a diagram that's living, and then from that, and this is why I did the experiment with the sort of the web page, was okay, and then you can link out to known things, so you just write some content about it. But often it's the map that probably is the magical interconnection between all these things. Otherwise, essentially you have a vast amount of text or web pages, which is no bad thing, but may not of themselves give you the overall picture. Well, I'll say it. The thing I really wish I could also do is actually hypertextual view. And I'm beginning to see that probably you may not be able to create the picture that is in hyperbolic view in Tinderbox, but actually all the information's there because you. So in other words, if someone much cleverer than me wants to go write this, essentially because you have the link, so you decide which link paths you want to follow, and then you can using something like an AI as the intermediary, you can actually go into the document and even if it's not there in the notes, it is there in the XML, which Claude Code or something's going to be able to read, and we can reassemble this. And I think it's quite valid because you might say, well, I mean, I have that same reflexive thing. Oh, wouldn't it be useful if I could, this was just a button in the thing? But there's an ROI to this, and the question is actually how many people would even need this? And probably actually not a lot. It will be extremely useful for a number of people, but not everyone is doing the same thing with the tool. And I think I'm sort of very mindful of that fact. And I've made enough suggestions over the years where I've got a very kind reply saying, well, that's a wonderful idea. We'll stick that on the spike. And there it has remained. Because it is interesting, but it's probably not something that, it's reasonable to divert the sort of main focus of the app to it. And I'm very conscious, for instance, at the moment, there's really, really interesting stuff happening with things like actually just settling down the realities of AI and MCP, and indeed, things like the command bar, which the demo we just had, which I think is remarkably useful, and I think will make the app a lot more approachable for a large number of people. But still, this idea of being able to take a map and reuse it and show it, and something Michael Becker brought up with me. I showed him this a few days ago, and he said, yes, so my method of wanting to capture essentially interim process maps, well, we can probably do this because you've only got to make the map in a sense the once, even if you don't keep it, and then you can create the SVG for that, and that will persist. And I'm not suggesting there isn't actually a vast amount of code between the idea I've suggested and the actual outcome, but I just float the idea really to see if that gives anyone else the excitement that I've had from it. So thank you.
Awesome. And Mark, on that, what are your next steps? Like, how are you seeing this work evolve for you?
Well, at the moment, I'm doing some very naughty things. It's like I realized that happily, SVG and Tinderbox maps use the same coordinates. So one of the things was next experiment. The reason I was playing around with the bounds and things, so I was thinking, actually, wouldn't it be useful once you have basically a mature diagram, say, okay, well, let's just make the top left-hand corner 0, 0. Wouldn't it just be easier? Because for everything else you want to do, then whenever you look at the SVG, you're not trying to work out where things are. So I'm doing some simple stuff like that, and partly I want to talk to the people I'm working with to say, is this interesting? Because one of the interesting things in the project is the one facility they don't actually have filled is having a web developer to do the web output. And I said, well, is this a year where that is not necessarily a blocker? Because until you basically built your Tinderbox and you know the message you want to put out, you don't know what web thing you want to build. And we're all the victims of our experience. So if you go to a web developer and said, I need a website, they will give you a website. Not necessarily the one you wanted, and possibly very pretty, but not what you wanted. Whereas being able to get to the point where probably, the thing I'm seeing is I could probably now leverage an AI to get something that has all the bits there, at which point then you would want a human who has an aesthetic that the computer doesn't have to say, okay, this is how we make this actually usable to our audience. And pragmatically, in the business context, then you're actually paying real money for real expertise, which isn't and sorry, that sounds like I'm disparaging the skill that's involved in making the website. It's not that, but the point is having someone around who doesn't necessarily understand the complexity of the information you're putting there, because I'm reflecting on a thing I'm trying to write for Hypertext this year, which is that one of the oddities of the niche I find myself in is that invariably I'm always the person in the room who is speaking for the information. The engineers are speaking for the way the information is wrecking their code. The end users are complaining the information isn't what they wanted. And there's normally muggins here saying, well, no wonder it's not working because you keep doing terrible things to it, and it's what keeps me working in a tool like Tinderbox, because I am able to actually keep my eyes very much on the context of what I'm doing. And yes, I've explored Action Code a lot, and indeed pushed it, and others have taken it much further. But I mean, the epiphany, in a sense, from the AI at the moment is that that expertise is or the value of that expertise is deflating rapidly. And I mind not. That is the march of progress, and that is how things should be. So the fact that you don't need to have instant internal mental recall of all sorts of arcane commands is great. It really is. But those are just means to an end. The thing that the living, breathing thing for me inside the Tinderbox is the information. It's a distillation of what I'm trying to do. And in terms of the output, which inherently is these days linked to the web, because that allows you to just spread across any platform, is this sense of, am I communicating usefully to the user? So it's not an exercise in ego. It's not, have I made something sexy and everyone's going to give me plaudits for it. No, it's, have they understood what I actually tried to put across them? Because if it doesn't, then I've completely wasted my time.
Yeah, I mean, I want to go back to your comment that you made earlier, though. I agree. Progress is moving us forward. Expertise is changing. And I suspect is Mr. Eddie left us? Looks like Mr. Eddie might have left us. There he is.
I'm here.
But at what point does our lack of understanding of how things work make it such that we are unable to repair them, unable to maintain them, and we get to the point where we can press the elevator button, but we have no idea actually how to fix an elevator, and when it breaks and we're stuck in it, we're dead. Like, what do we, Asimov has a really good quote on this, and I'll try to look it up. But, is in this idea of that at some point we're going to forget how to maintain and build the things that we've made. And when society layers on all of these layers of additional abstraction, I mean, that's going to that could cause problems for us.
That's the classic old story by E.M. Forster, The Machine Stops.
Yeah, that's it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Dave.
But is it not in the when the very first cars came? So in fact, the mechanic was what you had. If you owned a car, you either were a mechanic or you owned a mechanic, employed a mechanic, because the thing was broken down as much as it worked because of all new technology. Nowadays, most of us drive a car. It's probably use automatic gears. So if it's an electric car, I mean, who knows how it works? And yet we drive on the road at vast distance and high speed. And I just put that up as a slight counter. The question is entirely right, and it's one we should ask. But I think we all too easily forget that things that were just insanely difficult before are comparatively trivial now, and not everyone, or it is just not effective for everyone to have the fine understanding. The bigger question to ask is, if nobody has the understanding, well, then you are bugging. If all the lights go out and no one knows how to fix it, you have to go back. There was a lovely story, as funny as talk about naval context, is from some while back where it was US own frigate. Basically, all the systems went out somewhere in the South Pacific, and it was after people apparently had been stopped on teaching astronavigation. But someone on board basically had the smarts to get them home, get out the sextant, work out where you were, because there was no radar, no GPS or anything. It was probably a bit before GPS anyway. But that makes the point. So one of the questions becomes: so what is it you need to retain? You can't remember everything. Somebody will know it, but not everyone can know it. So what is the minimal amount of information that enables you to connect with a person who does have that information to get you forward? Anyway, that's my take on it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Mark, I have
David.
to inject. You pointed out that, well, I was thinking about learning how to drive. I was 14 or 15, thinking about driving, and a friend actually had a Triumph car and motorcycle, and I was just astute enough to say, well, are these? So we're talking 1962, 63, and I was aware enough that English machinery had a poor reputation for reliability, and he pointed out that, well, if you were wealthy enough to have such a device, you obviously had a man, which you and that the British machinery was designed intentionally so you would be fondling the thing on a regular basis. And American machinery is built and you wear it out and you throw it away and buy another one. And so the hugely different, the prosperity, the superabundance of this virgin country is, most of the rest of the world does not enjoy the superabundance of this virgin country, which is still virgin. I should drive it. I'm probably no more than 5 miles away from multiple horse farms, no more than 10 miles from the center of Boston. This place is still empty. Most places are not. But anyway, good stuff, great stuff.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, and so the idea is, and I'm thinking about all of this, is like we're facing this issue of technology dependency and knowledge atrophy, and when those two things come together, it causes problems. And I'm really trying to figure that out. Yeah, Jacob, get your hand up. You're muted too.
Yeah, I didn't mean to raise my hand. It must be the AI thinking my hand was raised. I might be wrong about this, but it seems like this has been kind of an ongoing problem. Like you think about, like I couldn't work on an automobile like I could have when I drove my 1981 Mustang. Like there was a little computer in it, but not much. Like I could change the carburetor and clean it out, and I did all that stuff and have the mental scar tissue to prove it. But like I mean, we already. I guess my point is this problem is just a progression, right? We none of us
Right.
in this room presumably could work on our cars, right? Like you. Yeah, or you'd have to go buy a manual and read it and understand it and all that. Like you need to get trained to do it. So I don't know. I worry about it too. I guess I don't know what the alternative is. I don't know.
Well, part of me wants to not necessarily need the answer, but does want to continue to worry about it enough so that I maintain some semblance of non-technical dependency and don't allow some types of knowledge to atrophy just simply because working the brain in that way is healthy.
Learn how to grow food and how to dispose of human waste. I'd make those priorities 1 and 2.
Oh, good point. Yeah. All right.
And number
Anybody
3 is
else?
make fire.
Make fire. Yeah. Yeah. Those are pretty good priorities, actually. Yeah. So grow food and cook food, I guess, is the fire part. All right. Okay. We got about 7 minutes left. Anybody have any final thoughts for our March meetup?
I put it in the chat, but I wanted to know why LLMs love Markdown, I mean, for all the virtues of being plain text, it's plain text that's all marked up. But it apparently uses the semantic meaning of the various delimiters you use to specify things, and it assigns higher semantic meaning or importance to names or titles of things. And it brought me back to the whole discussion we had about how you name or title a note, and all the ambiguity and uncertainty and amorphous nature of titling things. And it makes me wonder how well trained our LLMs are, given our inability to really focus on what the meaning of a name or a title is.
Chuck, comment?
You would have to poke David Eddy with that, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Well, we dance around this issue of particularly how the command bar that Mark was showing is my observation, which may be different from yours, is that humans have an incredible ability to shift contexts and not notice when we've done it. So I organize my bookends differently. I don't want bookends inside Tinderbox or something, or Kevin Think. I want to organize different collections differently, and I have a soft mental switch to know when I've switched between these different contexts. AI is completely incapable of recognizing context shifts because its AI is based on statistics. And it's just, I've been watching this. I've said this. I apologize for beating on this. I've been watching this BS since 1964, when the intelligence community was wanting to fund our machine translation, Russian into English. We've made some progress, but I would say the problem set is still expanding far faster than our ability to actually wrestle it into predictable circumstances of devoid of hallucinations. So anyway, that's blah blah blah. That's
all right,
my naming.
Mr. Anderson, Mr. Rogers.
Just quickly, yeah. I mean, one of a useful epiphany I've had with the AI is to, because I remember thinking, well, why does it keep wanting to go and do Apple scripts or terminal commands? And of course, you have to remember it can't see and it can't think, and it's not an insult, but the frustration is to sell it to the general populace. A complete lie has been told. If we had a better sort of working understanding of what it's saying, because I think it was Mark said to me, he said, when we were discussing an MCP problem, he said, well, it's either, as far as it's concerned, a thing is either there or it's not, and it just pops into existence. So it doesn't have our sense of what things are, and so most of our frames of reference are completely wrong for this problem. And the fact that it's a probabilistic model, as David said, is what it is, but it still does amazing things with it. But I think the hardest part is, and the thing I'm trying to school myself to do is to remember that whilst I think it's useful for the human to talk nicely to the AI because it's useful for us, but to realize that it doesn't know any of that, and also it doesn't think and see. So it's amazing, actually, that I can give it a diagram and it can make another diagram from it, and it cannot see that diagram, and that should give us pause for thought. It's a marvelous thing, but I find, as someone who writes a lot of documentation or multiple-point process documentation, is what's really interesting is how would I better write for my non-human audience, and that's to be continued, because I don't know the answer. Dave, sorry.
You'd have to annotate the use of every word in this sentence I use this word to mean thus and such. And 3 paragraphs later, I use the same term to mean something different.
They are
Well,
very literal. And I want to wrap this back to Michael's technology issue. My daughter lives in LA, which is under a heat dome right now. And she went and put gas in her car and left her car running and closed the door with her French bulldog in there to go into the gas station to get some change for whatever reason. And I get a phone call from her. She cannot unlock her car. It's a 2000 something Honda Accord, nice car. The key fob will not unlock it. The mechanical key inserted into the lock would not unlock it. She couldn't unlock the trunk with it. So I went to Claude, and because I said remote, the Claude assumed I should have used the word fob. I think I might have gotten a better answer. And it kept saying, it wanted to say, well, this is a known quirk with Honda vehicles, and you have to press the remote start button to shut the engine off, and that should liberate the locks, and then you can use the locks. Of course, it wasn't a remote start; it was a keyless entry system, and it got confused. And no, one guy wanted to help her by just, lifting the terminal on the battery. She ended up signing up for AAA, and then when you want AAA to come right then on your first day you sign up, it's an extra $120. So for $270, I think it was. And fortunately, they had a cancellation, so they were able to get there in like 15 minutes. She got her car open, but I mean, how can you get locked out of a car? I mean, that just seems incomprehensible to me. That should have been a National Transportation Safety Board recall notice, But and then when you're
Did no one use a coat hanger, or does that not work anymore?
Yeah, we noticed you have spoken, so we will lower your hand in 1 second. Okay, yeah, good. I was interrupted by the thing, but yeah, it's just they are very literal. You have to be very careful in your prompts. You have to understand exactly what it is the problem is that you want them to solve, much like Tinderbox. And yeah, we don't know how to get it in and out of our cars. And the really frightening thing is the dog was drinking her day-old Slurpee that had been sitting in the car at 90 degrees. So that poor girl. But anyway.
Wow.
It is interesting that something that because one of the things I thought I would like to do with an AI was to say feed it ATB-ref, which is something I've sat alongside for about 20 something years now, and say, well, what are the bits that don't work? What doesn't make sense? Or is, well, no, can't do that because it doesn't work on the anti-pattern. It can take what you've got and it can sort of pull up some syntax errors, and it has done that. It's found some experience. But the thing I really wanted it to do, I realized that it's still a human task.
Yeah. Okay. All right, everybody. We'll top the hour. Thank you very much. And we will see you next week.